Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give it a couple minutes for people that are continuing to join, running a little bit late. Hopefully you guys are staying warm. I see people here from different parts of the country.
I see Sharon's on the call. Good morning, Sharon. How you doing?
Hey, Sharon. I think she's on mute.
Yeah.
And Sky, we'll wait for you to give us the go ahead, and I can kick things off by introducing Ray, and Ray will then introduce Chris.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we're good to get started.
Okay. Awesome. So I want to thank everybody for joining us and welcome to our private investor meeting with ARC Medical, which is one of the most exciting life sciences companies we've seen. Just in a nutshell, the company improves surgical patient recovery by preventing adhesions, which is the most common complication in knee, shoulder, gynecological, and abdominal surgeries. Some of the key investment considerations we want to draw your attention to is that, first of all, ARC is operating in a gigantic market with a TAM of 11 billion. Company's already gotten excellent efficacy and clinical data, which I think Chris will talk about soon. Great IP portfolio. The company also has experienced a good amount of fundraising traction. They've already raised 39 million, 21 in equity, and 18 million in non-dilutive revenue and grants. We think that this is obviously a unicorn level exit potential, and the team is absolutely world class. So thank you for joining. And to kick things off, I'd like to introduce you to Raymond Jordan. Ray is the managing partner of a family office called Elmstead Partners, which is based in Boston and on the West Coast. He is the lead investor and has also a deep level of experience at senior capacities with companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna. And Ray, thank you so much for joining us. If you can kick things off, and let's go from there. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Tien, and it's a pleasure to talk with you all. And a pleasure, especially for me, to be able to represent and introduce ARC Medical to you all. So my role at Elmstead Partners, which is it's a family LLC held across 3 generations. I do the investing for the group. We've done over 100 private placements across industry sectors, of which about half are in life sciences. And of those 50 some odd life science placements, ARC is our largest commitment by far in 2 regards, both in terms of the total amount we've invested and in terms of the number of tranches that we've come in to the company. One of our indicators of kind of conviction is if we come back to the till and are ready to write the next check and the next check, and we've been indeed willing to do that. For quick introduction, as Tien mentioned, my background was across life science companies, especially deep in medical devices, where Johnson & Johnson had pulled me in to put together a corporate affairs function for them in that space. And as we've done our investing, we've been focused on potential breakthrough innovations. That's sort of the core. But we want those innovations to have very clear first application, and ideally the potential to move beyond that application to other areas. Beyond that, we need an IP fence surrounding the property, a team that can implement, and ideally 1 or 2 strategic partnerships that prove kind of the viability of things. Of course, identifying the potentially breakthrough innovative technology means there's some data, at least preclinical data, that supports that. And honestly, ARC Medical just hit it on all fronts for us. A couple of years ago, we made the first investment. We've seen the company managed very thoughtfully from a cash point of view, and meeting commitments on an ongoing basis. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce a very high conviction investment we've got, and a CEO who I think is doing just a tremendous job in pulling the company forward, in meeting its commitments, and kind of conserving cash and keeping the progress moving. And that CEO is Chris Springate, who I know a number of you have had the chance to meet. And I look forward to hearing from Chris again today. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Ray, for that really nice introduction. I'm thinking we should just get you to start doing the pitches for ARC. So thank you for that, and thank you also for your investments. And thanks, Tien, and the team, Sky and Emily, for hosting us today. Really appreciate it. So I'll just give a bit of my background. So I'm Chris Springate, the CEO for ARC Medical. Prior to ARC, I was very fortunate. I was a member of the team at a different company that designed and developed a stent. This stent was then later partnered with Boston Scientific. Sales in the first year for this stent were $2 billion US. It was just an amazing success and a very simple story. You know, we put these little metal springs into the blood vessels that feed hearts so that heart attack patients could recover better after that heart attack. So now, today at ARC, we see this as another unicorn, and although it's a complex technology, again, a very simple story. We are preventing what are called internal surgical adhesions, abnormal growths that form inside the body after common surgeries. We have a liquid medical device, very fast and easy to apply into the surgical site at the end of the surgery. The liquid flows throughout that entire surgical site, provides a physical barrier that prevents the formation of adhesions. It's biodegradable, it's gone in 30 days. So again, very simple story. So let me get into the presentation here. So our focus as a company is to improve surgical patient care, recovery, and in particular their outcomes by preventing these internal adhesions. So 4 key parts here to our chat today. So one is these are large unmet medical needs and markets. We see within 5 years of launch, and I'll get into that in a bit, of taking out a large portion of this total addressable market, over 11 million patients yearly, $11 billion for the total addressable markets. We have some very compelling efficacy and safety data in orthopedic patients that have come in for a reoperation. These are knee and shoulder patients who are under expanded access approvals. We've been able to use our J-Coat liquid medical device in these patients. And this is on the backs of having completed a large safety clinical trial with 76 healthy volunteers in which we proved out the safety of our liquid medical devices. Intellectual property is incredibly strong. We have 7 separate patent families. They all have composition of matter claims. This provides us with exclusivity through 2039 and beyond. And we have very clearly defined near-term milestones. We've just started a clinical trial with our J-Coat liquid medical device for orthopedic patients. We're initiating a clinical trial for our IP-Coat liquid medical device for gynecological patients. We expect top-line data from these clinical trials in 2026 and to obtain approvals and initiate sales in key territories outside of the US, so Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, in 2027, looking at these revenues initiating. So what is the most common surgical complication today? And of course, it is these internal adhesions. They form during the first 5 days after the surgery. That's the key period here. And these are abnormal growths that form in between tissues, really a kind of internal scar. If not prevented, these adhesions become permanent and they cause lots of havoc for patients. So for example, orthopedic patients undergoing a knee or shoulder surgery, they often get stuck here, for example, with their shoulder. They can't change their shirt by themselves. Their knee gets stuck where they can't bend it more than 90 degrees. So these people, often can't ride a bike. They can't even walk up and down stairs safely. This is an example here. This is Jane, so woman in her 30s, physiotherapist, very active soccer athlete. She had a common ACL, MCL knee repair surgery, got stuck at 95 degrees, couldn't bend her knee more than that. And I'll come back to Jane in a bit. Also, patients undergoing gynecological and abdominal surgeries, this can be a huge issue. Over 30% of these patients end up with adhesions. Many of these patients have to come back for an emergency surgery to cut the adhesions apart. Otherwise, they end up with chronic pain, infertility, even bowel obstruction due to these adhesions. And so we're focused in on the SOM, serviceable obtainable markets. So the go-to markets here really are over 1 million patients, $1.1 billion in revenues within 5 years of launches. We have two products. Jocoat is in a 10 ml pre-filled syringe, and that's easily and rapidly applied into the joint at the end of the surgery. And then IP Coat for gynecological and abdominal adhesions, a 30 ml pre-filled syringe with an applicator, easy and rapid to apply. What's important to note is these products are easily used in open surgeries. They're also easily used in arthroscopic and laparoscopic surgeries because the liquid, it can literally just be pushed quickly into that surgical site. What we've shown is that following application into the abdominal pelvic cavity or the joint, the IP coat or gel coat, the device flows throughout that entire surgical area, provides a physical barrier for 4 weeks. Again, it only needs to be there for 5 days, so we've got lots of protection, provides that physical barrier, and then it's eliminated from the body. We can get really nice, healthy healing as a result without adhesions in these patients and these studies. And so these are some of the initial efficacy data. So these are patients that were treated under expanded access approval. So we don't have approval yet in any jurisdictions, but because there's nothing on the market for joints, and these patients had adhesions from a previous surgery, we've gotten approvals to treat them when they come back in for a reoperation to cut those adhesions apart. We have long-term efficacy data on the first 9 patients, 7 knee and 2 shoulder reoperations. These data are really compelling because we're seeing this increase of 30 degrees or more in that range of motion in patients that typically have poor outcomes or prognosis following these reoperations where they cut apart the adhesions. Getting the gel coat, we've seen this large sustained increase in the range of motion. And so Jane was actually our very first patient. She came back for a reoperation. They went in with an arthroscope. They cut apart the adhesions, put 10 mils of our liquid Jocoat medical device in. She went from only 95 degrees to where she could then bend her knee over 135 degrees. And it's a funny story because 2 months after that surgery, she sent the texted the surgeon a picture. She was climbing a mountain in Patagonia. He forwarded that on to us. She's now either trail running or riding a bike daily. And so initially we had done a large clinical trial in healthy volunteers. So this was a transabdominal injection in which we applied IP coat into the abdominal pelvic cavity and followed these patients, 76 in total. We showed that we have very compelling safety in these patients with or without a drug that's commonly used as an anticoagulant in these patients. And so we've initiated a clinical trial with Joco in the knee ACL anterior cruciate ligament repair. We just treated the first patient on December 4th. We're treating the next patient tomorrow. So we're off to a fast start with this clinical trial. Basically, we have 24 patients that are coming in for this knee repair surgery. They receive the Jocoat at the end of the surgery. The primary efficacy endpoint is at 12 weeks, so it's quite a rapid time point. You know, it's not like a cancer trial where we have to follow somebody for a year or 2 years. So we expect top-line data from this clinical trial in mid-2026. The control group are from a very large separate clinical trial that was very recently completed. And in the control group, it's from the patients from the same clinical center that had exactly the same surgery but did not get Joco. And folks, if you do have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to ask them. Happy to answer questions as we go along here. We've just applied for approval to start a clinical trial in gynecological surgery patients. These are women undergoing endometriosis gynecological surgery. There will be 33 patients that are enrolled. 22 will receive our IP coat liquid medical device at the end of the surgery. The other 11 will receive a blinded placebo-controlled solution at the end of the surgery. The surgeon goes back 12 weeks later and they do what's called a second look laparoscopy. They videotape and score the prevention or the formation of the adhesions in the abdominal pelvic cavity, and that's how we get the efficacy data. So we expect to get approval in the next couple months, initiate this clinical trial, and see top-line data from this clinical trial at the end of 2026. Again, very short time frame to get the primary efficacy endpoint. It's only 12 weeks after that initial surgery. From both of these clinical trials, the Joe code from the last slide, the IP code from this slide, we will use those top-line data to apply for approvals in places like Europe, Middle East, so Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Oceania, Australia, for example, and then initiate sales in those territories in 2027. We're already working on distributorship agreements in those key territories. So for Joko, it's very interesting. There aren't any direct competitors. Our indirect competitors are comprised of expensive and painful procedures to either break or cut apart the adhesions in the joint only after they form. Within the gynecological and abdominal surgery space, IP coat confers a number of competitive advantages, including as a liquid, very fast and easy to apply, and prevents adhesions throughout the entire abdominal pelvic cavity. Intellectual property for ARC is incredibly strong. We have 5 separate patent families that have granted in the US and in Japan. They all have composition and matter claims that protect IP coat and Joe coat through 2039. In the US, under the patent term extension, we expect the last patent to expire in 2041 or later. Then we have additional patents that have granted or are pending in territories, key territories throughout the entire world. In addition to the patents, we have complexity and trade secrets around how we manufacture the liquid and around the physical chemical characterization of the liquid that is the medical device for Joe coat and IP coat. So these products will never be easy to copy. We've done a lot over the last several years. We have our own good manufacturing practices, ISO certified facility where we manufacture the key component for the liquids. The medical devices themselves are manufactured and sterilized at a contract manufacturer in the US. We've made over 10,000 units to date, over 4 GMP batches. As we've suggested, we've treated 17 total Joe coat patients under compassionate use, so expanded access approvals, and we just treated the first patient in the clinical trial. We're now starting the clinical trials for the Joe coat and the IP coat. We're going to issue a press release today. Very excited to share with you folks. We just treated the very first gynecologic surgery patient with IP coat, and that was under an expanded access approval. And that surgery and the application went super smoothly. So we're sending out that press release in about 30 minutes. And this is where we're going. So in 2026, starting here in the green for the select territories outside of the US and Japan, top line data 2026, approval and revenue starting in 2027. We're raising $5 million to help expand and support those clinical trials and to provide a runway for well past 2 years in order to support the sales initiating in 2027. And these 2 clinical trials that result in approvals outside of the US, these are pilot clinical trials for the US. And we know this because we had some really good interactions with the US FDA, so we're clear on the clinical pathway for the US. We will then come back to the US. We will raise 50 million US, and that will pay for the larger pivotal clinical trials, both for Joe coat for orthopedic and IP coat for gynecological in the US, providing top-line data in the US in 2029, approvals in 2030. And I am pleased to let you know we've been in discussions with a very large fund towards that 50 million. We most recently met with them a week and a half ago in New York. It was our 3rd in-person meeting. They've been going through some of the due diligence. They've verbally committed to provide us with a term sheet for 25 million in January. So we're looking forward to that. We're here today to clarify, to focus on the 5 million. We're looking at bringing in the funds, closing that 5 million as quickly as we can. If we receive the term sheet for the 25 million prior to closing the 5 million, then that will not become available. The pre-money for the 5 million is 45 million US. The pre-money for the 50 million that we're raising, that we have a term sheet coming for, is 70 million. So the 5 million is at a discount to the larger fundraising. This is the team. I'll draw your attention to a couple of people. So we talked about Ray there, the bottom left. Allison Crow in the bottom right, fantastic. She's our VP Clinical. Allison has been instrumental in designing and running clinical trials that resulted in the approvals and commercialization and sales for 3 earlier generation anti-surgical adhesion medical devices. Robert Litchfield, our Chief Medical Officer, he leads a team of 15 surgeon key opinion leaders. All of these surgeons have recent relevant clinical trial experience. We're very familiar with how our products get paid for, including the reimbursement and the pricing, depending on the territory, the indication, and the setting, whether it's hospital or an ambulatory surgical center. There is either direct reimbursement or reimbursement comes from the umbrella diagnosis related group payment. We've also modeled out the pricing. So US list prices and outside of Japan, it's $1,000 for the IP coat, $2,000 for the Joe coat. This results in a profit margin for ARC ranging from $114 to $870 per unit. We've also modeled out the forecast for the revenues. Primary focuses on the US, seeing over $1 billion in sales within 5 years of launch, and then support from these other smaller territories, including Europe, Middle East, Oceania, and Japan, of over $100 million per year within 5 years or so of launch in each of those two territories as well. Again, we expect to launch in Europe, Middle East in 2027, launching in US and Japan 2030. So in summary, look, through surgical adhesions, we have large unmet medical needs and markets, very strong both efficacy and safety clinical data, very strong exclusivity through the issued patents with composition of matter claims, and very clearly defined near-term milestones. As I said, as Tien said, we've raised 21 million in equity, and of course, shareholders are really happy that we've almost matched that with 18 million in non-dilutive revenues and grants. We're here today to focus in on a $5 million fundraise, and again, after this, we've got a $50 million fundraise coming. Use of proceeds from the 5 million, as I said, 2 years of runway, support the current clinical trials so we get to approval and sales in Europe, Middle East, Australia. Happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Yes, I
Awesome.
wanted
Thank
to
you so
just
much.
thank you, Chris, and introduce you guys to Sky, who you guys probably know. Sky's going to run the Q&A, and if you have any questions, you can put them directly in the box. You can direct message Sky or email her. And I know we have a bunch of questions already, so let me turn it over to Sky, who'll run the Q&A, and also Sky will put up an investor poll at some point as well. Thanks, Sky.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. So the first question, it says, just clarifying about the $5 million raise versus the 25 million, and the pre-money that you had mentioned. So I guess some clarity on that.
You bet. Yeah, thanks for the question. So the 5 million, the pre-money is 45 million, and the post then will be 50, and then for this 50 million that we're raising, the pre-money is 70 million. So there's a significant bump up from the 5 to the 50. Yeah.
Okay, great. And for that person, if you have any follow-up questions on that, feel free to let me know. Next question is, do you have an established plan for processing payments from government insurance programs, commercial insurers, or self-pay patients?
So yeah, so we've done a lot of work already around the reimbursement and what that looks like. How do we get paid at the end of the day? Yeah. In addition to that, we've also have very clear marketing and sales plans for the US, and then we'll be working with distributorships in areas outside of the US.
Okay, great. What's the expected exit plan and the return for investors?
So 90% chance we will be acquired by a larger medical device company that's already in both the gynecological, abdominal, and the orthopedic space. There's a smaller chance that our exit will be by going public. What we've been working on for the last 3 years is establishing relationships with the large medical device companies. And so we have a number of them like Baxter, Stryker, Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, et cetera, that are following us very closely. They're very keen to see the data coming out of the 2 clinical trials that we're running now. As well, in addition to this efforts, we have also over the last 3 years been meeting with investment banks and are being followed very closely, primarily New York based. And these range from investment banks such as Oppenheimer, H.C. Wainwright, that are fantastic mid-market medical device focused banks, to all the way up to Sumitomo, Goldman Sachs, RBC. So we have very good relationships from them, which puts us in a good position. The markets will turn around one day, where if we chose to, then we could go public.
Okay, awesome. And then for the person who had asked the first question about the 5 million bridge to the 25 million, there's a follow-up question saying, can you re-clarify? I think you had mentioned something about whether the 5 million was being raised or not.
So we're raising the 5 million. What we're pushing to do is bring the 5 million and close that as quickly as we can. So we have a number of investors that are very keen to come into that. What we're doing is looking for a lead on that 5 million. So Ray, who you met at the beginning of the call, he led our last financing that we closed a year ago. So we're looking for a lead for that 5 million. We've got a number of investors that want to come in behind that. The 5 million will close as soon as we have the funds in, or we will cut it off when we receive the term sheet for the larger $50 million financing. And so the term sheet that we've been told will be coming in January is for 25 million.
Okay. And then another question about that is, you answered the one for the lead investor, so you're looking for a lead investor, and then how much of the 5 million is filled and when does it close?
Yeah, so we have enough folks in line where really they're looking for somebody else to come in and do that due diligence and provide a term sheet. So we can fill out the rest of the five. So we're looking for somebody who would come in for at least 1 million, or a number of individuals that then we would close that with the lead in place.
Okay, great. And then this person is saying that it appears that you will invoice the surgical clinic directly and the clinic will incorporate your charges into the total operation costs. Is that how the payment process works?
So, so in all cases, we will invoice the clinic, whether it's a hospital or an ambulatory surgical center directly, yes. And then it depends on the surgery. So, for example, for gynecologic surgeries in a hospital, so they're going to use IP code, um, the the hospital gets the funds for that out of their umbrella payment. So they might get paid, say, $12,000 for that gynecological surgery. They'll take the funds for the IP code out of that. So that's how that gets paid. In the ambulatory surgical centers, it depends on the patient. So, for example, if a patient is, say, a workers' compensation patient, they're covered by a private payer, say Blue Cross, Blue Shield, there is a specific code that can be used for these types of devices that the ambulatory surgical center gets direct reimbursement. And they really like this because, of course, in addition to helping the patients recover better from the surgery, the ambulatory surgical center can add 20%, which is a huge benefit to the ambulatory surgical center because their margins tend to be pretty thin on a day-to-day basis. So in that case, it's a direct reimbursement from the private payer to the ambulatory surgical center. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I did want to let the people know on this call that we posted a poll up so you can respond to that at your convenience. We'll leave it up for a few minutes as we continue with the Q&A. The next question is, what is your timeline for your major inflection points, the technical, regulatory, or commercial?
You bet. Yeah. So in the short term, the big inflection points are data readout from J-code clinical trial in the knee, and that'll be mid 2026. Next major inflection point is the data readout from IP code in the gynecologic endometriosis clinical trial. That'll be late 2026. Then we expect initial approvals for Joko in mid 2027 in those select territories and initiating sales, and then getting approvals and initiating sales for IP code in the select territories towards the end of 2027. Um, Other key inflection points then will be we expect in 2027 to get approvals from the US FDA to run the pivotal clinical trials in the US, and then seeing the top line data from both of those clinical trials in the US in 2029, and approvals in the US for both products in 2030.
Okay, great. And then another question says, how many months of cash left does the company currently have?
Yeah, we currently have 8 months of cash on hand. Yeah.
Okay, great. Next question is, how are you thinking about pricing, reimbursement, and ROI for hospitals and clinicians?
Right. So I think I've addressed that through the earlier answers, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think no problem. I just
Yeah.
thought I'd ask it again in case
All
there's
good.
anything else you
Yeah.
need to add.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit more about your team's background and what uniquely positions ARC to execute on this opportunity?
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, so go through them one by one here. So I'll start in the bottom left with Ray, who you met. So Ray was corporate affairs leadership, so including branding and marketing for some very large med techs, and he also has experience in working with smaller clinical stage companies like ARC. So his initial roles included Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, Amgen. And then he was trying to semi-retire during COVID, and Moderna actually brought him in during the heyday because they really need somebody that could lead their corporate affairs. So that's Ray. Um, Mike Liggett in the left side there in the middle. So fantastic, very experienced medtech, biotech CFO for both private and NASDAQ listed companies. So, Mike, of course, works with our auditors, make sure that we're in excellent shape. If we wanted to go public, that we could do that. And also that, we have a clean data room for investors that are sophisticated and going into the data room. Alison Crowe, I've talked about in the bottom right. Again, she's done this, right? She's been in surgical adhesions for over 25 years, has designed and run the clinical trials, resulting in approvals for 3 earlier generation surgical adhesion products. She's a fantastic relationships with the surgeons. They're all a little bit scared of her, which is fantastic. So because when you're running these clinical trials, they need to be run really tight, and she keeps them all in line. Bob Litchfield in the middle right. I'll talk a little bit more about him. So, very well respected orthopedic key opinion leader, KOL. He is the incoming president for the Canadian Orthopedic Association. Um, one of the surgery partners, and he's the medical director for what's called the Fowler Kennedy Sports Medicine Surgical Institute. It's a premier sports medicine surgical institute. He's a professor at Western University, very well respected orthopedics division within that university. And one of the other main professors there that he works with, Steve McDonald, was the previous president for the U.S. Knee Orthopedic Society. I've talked a bit about my background and previous success in having done this before with Angiotech for that stent. Um, and so I'm talking a lot, but I'll just give you a little more flavor. So we use a variable hub model, which has been super efficient cash-wise. So we have a core team, including running the ISO manufacturing facility. Beyond that, we have a number of consultants. There are about 7 that we work with on a daily basis. Many of them are so excited about what we're doing, and they can afford to only work for options, so it helps keep the cash down. But by only paying them either retainer or hourly basis, also helps keep the cash down, but we retain that expertise. Beyond that, we have about another 25 special consultants. This ranges from things like manufacturing, quality assurance, to financing. We might only chat with them once every 3 months, but when we have a question, say my manufacturing manager needs some help with something quite sophisticated, she can pick up the phone and get an answer immediately. So that variable hub or variable cost model has been super efficient for us, and yet we have expertise from about 35 folks.
Okay, wonderful. Is ARC Medical preparing F1 or S1 registration statement?
Yeah, I love that question. That must be from David Sands. David, nice to see you on the call here. And David, it was great meeting you at our dinner and then in New York a couple weeks later. So we're still working on this, so we can get back to you with an answer then. What you and I should do is have a call separately from this. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then why is ARC looking to close this $5 million round if you have 8 months of cash and a verbal offer for the larger round?
Yeah, really, the 5 million helps to make sure that we don't get our backs against the wall. We'd rather have 30 months of cash in the bank from the 5 million while we're negotiating that term sheet for the 50. Yeah. And of course, my job as CEO is to create some FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So it's like come in now for the 5 million or miss it, and then we're going to close that 25 without you. And I will just emphasize, having done this before, and we've had a lot of clinical milestones that we've hit recently. So in the last month, we've had a peer review acceptance of our phase 1 clinical trial data at the American Association of Gynecological Laparoscopic Surgeons meeting. It's the biggest, it's a US-based biggest gynecological surgeon physician society, if you like. And so those data were accepted, podium presentation. We very recently treated, the slide needs to be updated, the 20th orthopedic surgery patient undergoing a reoperation under expanded access approvals. We treated the first patient with Joe Coat in that clinical trial. We've submitted the package for the gynecological clinical trial. And as I said, we just treated the very first gynecological surgery patient with IP code under expanded access approval. That announcement is going to come out now. So all of these milestones were hit in the last month, which demonstrates what, the hard work that we've done over the last 12 to 18 months to get here. So it's really, we feel that ARC's a rocket ship. We're going to an exit of 1 to 3 billion. So we'd love for people to come on and join that ride. Yeah.
Okay, great. What do you feel are your biggest risks ahead, and how are you proactively going to mitigate them?
Absolutely. So we believe biggest risk is always regulatory. And so that's why we have been meeting with the US FDA. We've had 2 pre-submission meetings with the US FDA. We will continue to have more. So we're really clear on exactly what is it that the FDA agrees to regarding the clinical design for IPCO and for JOCO. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why so sometimes people will be like, "Oh, what about efficacy? What about safety?" We have done a battery of biocompatibility and safety studies in preclinical models, more than what's required. Um, and we've also, of course, now completed the very large safety study in humans with 76 healthy volunteers, which is a really, if you're familiar with phase 1 clinical trials, often you've got 12 or 18. That was a huge study, super well designed. The data are very clear, like our products are safe, well tolerated, and accepted. In addition to the efficacy data that we have now in the Joe Code expanded access approval patients, we've run efficacy studies in numerous animal models. So adult horses, pony foals, rabbits, rats, and in different types of surgeries. So ranging from tendon to spine in orthopedic to cardiac, thoracic, abdominal, gynecological. And we see in over half of these animals, they're completely adhesion free in the ARC treated animals, whereas the control animals all have adhesions. So fantastic, repeatable, compelling efficacy data. And we as humans, we form adhesions exactly the same way as a horse or a rabbit. So we're very confident we're going to continue to see the efficacy in the humans from our medical devices. So very translational into humans. And of course, we're seeing this now through the orthopedic data from the Joe Code expanded access uses.
Okay, awesome. How do you feel that your technology is integrating into current clinical workflows, and what kind of feedback have you received from the early adopters?
Yeah, it's been fantastic feedback. And you'll see this in the press release. So Professor Dr. Matthew Leonardi, who performed the very complex gynecological endometriosis surgery, at which at the end he applied the IP coat, he was raving how fast and easy it was to use and how smoothly the application was of the IP coat. So you'll see that in the press release when we send that out. Very similar statements from use of the Joe code. And what I'll do here is I'll share a video with you so you can see it's, like 30 seconds additional time, super easy to use for the Joe code. The IP code volume's a little bigger. It's still less than 2 minutes, and you'll get a sense. The surgeons are very excited by how fast and easy these products are to use. So I'm just going to share this video with you. So folks, this is that. Can you see this this video? It's in an operating room. There's some people dressed in blue. They're wearing the scrubs. There's a liquid syringe there.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So this is at the end of a shoulder reoperation surgery. This patient had had previous procedures resulting in adhesions. The surgeons went in with an arthroscope, cut apart the adhesions. The arthroscope's still in the shoulder. They're about to apply the Joe coat. And the Joe coat is in the syringe here that you see in the left of your screen. And so you can see how fast and easy this application is. The metal here is the arthroscope that was used to perform the surgery. The other end of the metal is still inside the joint. It's a standard connection between the syringe and the arthroscope, and they literally just push it in. And what we've shown through elegant radial studies is that liquid then flows throughout that surgical cavity, provides that temporary physical barrier that prevents adhesions. That's it. That's how fast and easy it is to use. Like, we don't even have to train a surgeon how to do that, right? Their assistant can do that part. Yeah. So really well. And another thing to really emphasize here is that, this is easily used in laparoscopic surgeries, right? It can of course also be used in open surgeries, but the vast majority of surgeries for abdominal gynecological have moved to this laparoscopic application. And again, that's just a push into the abdominal pelvic cavity.
Okay, perfect. Tian, I think I'd run through my questions. Did you get any questions, private message to you, or anything else you wanted to bring up?
I think we're good. I don't have any DMs on questions, but if anyone else has any questions, you can either raise your hand and ask Chris directly or put it in the chat box. And if
Great.
not, that's
Really,
fine too.
really appreciate everybody participating and attending today. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate that as well. Do reach out to us. We'll follow up with you if you have an interest potentially in participating in this 5 million. We'd love to get you folks involved.
That sounds
Thank you
awesome.
so much for joining us. And we'll follow up with those of you who have expressed an interest per the poll. Thank you, guys.